Hey everybody, welcome to this week's Q&As. It's Thursday, early afternoon, so hopefully everybody had enough time to get their questions in, but let's jump in and see what we got. First up, Brent wants to know if I know of any good sources to show how to disassemble and service consumer CRTs. Yeah, Steve from RetroTech, free YouTube channel or paid Patreon if you want access to other content and just, the normal Patreon support stuff. Also, the Console Mods Wiki and the CRT Wikis are both great resources for things like cap guides. And the only thing that you have to remember, which I know I say this every time, but it's worth mentioning, that the chances of you dying while working on a CRT is not zero under normal circumstances, whereas the chances of you dying while modding a Super Nintendo while under normal circumstances is zero. You'd have to get struck by lightning or try modding it in your bathtub or something crazy for there to be a serious risk. Whereas with CRTs, if you don't discharge it properly, you could get zapped. And if you have a heart issue, that could be it. So just please be very, very, very careful. But to continue, Brent said they own two 27-inch CRTs, a Panasonic Tau and a Sony Trinitron. Both awesome, and two 13-inch TVs, Orion and a Durabrand, that have never been serviced. They have the tools and experience in refurbishing and modding consoles, but they're a bit nervous tackling CRTs. They'd love to see instructions on disassembling the CRT chassis, how all the boards work together, and any tips on how not to fry it or themselves, good call, where to order caps, how to position the TV during disassembly, etc. They've been watching RetroTech USA. All right, cool, so you're already aware of Steve, but they were hoping I might have other places as well. Well, Steve's my go-to. There's certainly tons of other people out there that do it, but I'm not sure if any have the same amount of videos and content that you could watch for it, other than the wikis, of course. You should definitely check those out. But yeah, I mean, those are all awesome. The only things I could add to that is, once again, discharge your TV properly, and also kind of pick and choose what it is that you want to do and why. So if you have one of these that you absolutely love and the signal's shaky and blippy and there's a bunch of stuff going on, but there's no burn-in on the tube and it's very bright, chances are that tube is great, but you're going to need a recap and maybe some sort of even basic calibration. But if you have something that's burned in and kind of beat up, or if you have a CRT that it's just not your favorite, I wouldn't put the effort in. I would look to trade stuff like that or part it out. I mean, CRTs with burn-in still have good chassis boards and stuff like that too. So you could just talk to other groups of people and see who needs what and maybe kind of share stuff. But yeah, I mean, all of those things are excellent questions, and it's really just stuff like that experience is going to help a lot. But I love that you're just dipping your toe in the water first. You're not diving off into the deep end without even checking if there's water in the pool. I see that so often, and I'm glad to see you're approaching this with caution. But basic stuff, flat surface, take the back off of it, discharge it properly. Take pictures of everything or video too, so that when you plug stuff back in, you don't go, oh, did that wire go here or over there? For the big harnesses that you have to connect to the different boards. So it's the same basics as your average mod for a larger item, just make sure that you discharge the tube properly. But yeah, those are definitely the places that I would go to and start out with. But if anybody else has any other suggestions, please chime in the chat. I'd love to hear what anybody else or where everybody else is going for their CRT modding info. Next up, Photo Sven said it's been a while since they looked at the Mister, but with the Mister Multisystem 2 being released, they finally plan on getting one, or maybe even two. But they want to know how the audio and video DAC in the Retro Castle Dual RAM Mister would compare to the normal I/O board analog video output. So if you're talking about the original I/O board, it's better in absolutely every way. The video quality is going to be better. The audio quality is going to be a little bit better. But if you're talking about the 24-bit video DAC that is in the Mister Multisystem 2, as well as a lot of the other boards that have been released in the past year, it's basically the same. There might be a couple of differences here and there, but honestly, they're both excellent. So I really wouldn't think about that anymore. The only thing I would pay attention to is if for whatever reason you don't get a Mister Multisystem 2, check to see that whatever analog I/O board that you're using has the 24-bit DAC. So that way you could take advantage of PlayStation and N64 and some of their extra color palettes. And I think it applies to other consoles as well, possibly the Saturn and stuff like that. If you only play NES and Super Nintendo, it's probably not going to be a difference, but if you're investing your money in something, why not just get the right one to start? So yeah, that's really my only advice, but there's a lot of good choices these days, and I'm really interested to see the Mr. Multisystem 2 in person. Obviously, I did Ken did the post in the video on his teardown, and it looks awesome, but certainly something I'm just also excited to mess with myself. Next up, Apothecary 2 said, with the Switch 1, they already ran into an issue where its automatic surround sound setting wouldn't be passed through by their TV properly, assuming in ARC mode, so they had to connect it directly to the AVR. But now with the Switch 2 having 4K support, they've been searching for a solution to get it hooked up to the TV and RetroTink 4K simultaneously, since most games will still have a much lower render resolution. They then tried it with a splitter that was labeled 8K, but the Switch 2 then maxes out at 1080p and claims the TV doesn't support HDR. Are there any devices they could be confident will work with those features, even though they know since the Switch 2 is new, it could result in unforeseen HDMI issues? And is there also a confirmed device that allows PS3 compatibility, as the devices everyone knew worked seem to no longer be easily found online? So I have a couple of suggestions for you. First, with your current setup, it could simply be that the Switch is detecting the RetroTink 4K's input and saying, okay, well, this is the lower of the two inputs, assuming you have a 4K TV. So we're going to say that the EDID supports only the lower resolution. And that works fine for using it with the RetroTink, but what if you just want to go directly to your TV without looping it through the RetroTink? So that's where an EDID spoofer might help, and that might be pretty cheap as well. I think you can get those like $20 or less. So you could put that on there, and then you would just have to manually go into the Switch and change it back to 1080p 60 or lower going into the RetroTink 4K. I think if you sent it 4K, it would just look weird. It's not going to explode the RetroTink or anything like that. But that would certainly be a workaround. Or you could check the Switch to see if it has dip switches on it or any kind of way to manually control the EDID settings rather than just copy. You could also, if it's a dual input, dual output switch or multiple input, dual output switch, you could try swapping. So, unplug the TV and the RetroTink and swap the ports that those are in the Switch. So all of those might help. But to answer your actual question, do I know if there's equipment that just does all of this? No. And to make matters worse, I kind of thought that by now I would have just bought a ton more Switches and done another follow-up video on it, because most of the ones from the last video are not available. But with everything going on, there's no guarantee that this stuff is going to continue to be available. And I know you could say that at any time period, but it's worse now. So even in the incredibly unlikely scenario that somebody's like, I'm rich and I don't want to do all this research myself, here's a couple of grand, bunch of Switches, go try them and do some videos on them. Even if I did that, and maybe a month guaranteed before they ran out of stock, and are they going to be restocked? Are they going to be relabeled? You never know with stuff like this. So I'm going to be totally useless to you other than suggesting EDID stuff at the moment, but I do really, really want a good, solid HDMI choices, multiple choices for HDMI switches. Standard, a couple in, two out, a bunch of, maybe 10 in, 4 out HDMI matrix switching. I'd love them all to be PS3 compatible with specific EDID control if you needed them to. And I don't have that yet, and I would love to be able to try it. So maybe we'll get lucky and find something, but for now I would try messing with the EDID stuff, and worst comes to worst, you could just try to buy other things off of Amazon and return it if it doesn't work. And I try to never, ever, ever return or abuse the Amazon return policy. But if you're buying something that's just not working right, then that's not abusing it. It's just the product you bought isn't working the way it was designed to work. So yeah, but hopefully I'll have some more choices for HDMI stuff at some point this year. Next up, Apacher wants to build an RGB SCART setup using cables that sync on composite video. So when they go into their RGB modded consumer CRT, they could use the same cable to choose between composite and RGB, which works out great for games like a lot of 3D graphics PlayStation 1 games that rely on dithering pretty heavily in order to do that composite video blending to get the look that they were going for. And that's an awesome idea. That's what I have in one of those setups right over there that I talked about last week. But the problem problem Apasher's running into is, what about the PS1? Because that's, one of the best consoles for this argument that you would want to use composite with certain games, not all. But how would you get that cable wired properly, including with support for the gun con? And there's a couple of things to note here. So first of all, if you put one of these cables on a scope and you plug the gun con in, it doesn't drop the voltage. There's no 75 ohm termination on the gun con. So while it's technically a Y circuit, it doesn't apply to that warning because you're not terminating a video signal at a display. It's just passing it through the gun so it could read the sync and sync up to the information on screen. However, if you use one of those gun con ports, you can't have composite video going to a TV with that unless it's wired separately. So you could have something like a sync on composite RGB SCART cable made, and then you could have the port be sync on Luma, the RCA port, and that way your gun con hits the Luma port and doesn't touch composite video at all. I'm not sure if any manufacturer makes those or if it's something that could be made, but that would definitely solve the issue. Usually people do the opposite and they have sync on Luma going to the cable, so there's less potential interference, and have composite video on the jack. And in that scenario, you could plug that one into a CRT because they're each only terminated once. Luma as sync, composite video to a TV. Hopefully I'm not losing you here. I know it's getting a little bit, confusing. The other thing that you could do for gun con support is you can get one of those, I forgot the model number, but I'll leave a link in the description. It's a PlayStation Breakout adapter where you plug it into the AV port of your PlayStation. It's got a standard Sony AV jack on the back, so you can plug your RGB cable into that, and it also breaks out composite and audio. So if you have cables that don't have the gun con port, you could use that for gun con, but you would not be able to use that if you have like a sync on composite cable and use that port for a TV. It's the same exact thing as breaking it out in the cable itself. So I think the best scenario for you would be find somebody to make you a sync on composite cable that has Luma as the RCA breakout coming out of the console side of things. And that should work fine. Finding good cables that are custom made are really, really hard though. And that's one of those things where there's a few people that kind of fly under the radar in a good way that do a lot of custom cables. But once they start to get tons of orders, it's just hard to keep quality and to keep stock in. So you could kind of look around for that. But that's going to be a tough one to figure out. I think if you really want this scenario, another thing that you could do is just get a standard sync on Luma cable and then use the composite video to go to your TV. And you would just have to run a second cable to your TV for that, which is annoying, but at least there's zero issues for anything that. But yeah, I don't know. I'll check the stores and see, but I'll leave a link to the PlayStation Breakout adapter. And if I could find a cable that has already been set up like that, I'll leave a link for that as well. But yeah. And also as far as like, what's the best quality cable, check your, you posted this on Patreon, check your Patreon account. There's something coming soon that it's probably going to be a good solution for most scenarios. But this syncs on composite video, just like the HD RetroVision cables. So it might not be the best bet for you. So yeah, I don't know. That's going to be a tough one. You might have to end up just getting a custom SCART cable made from somebody. Next up, Ryan Pinney has a question about the necessity for an RGB mod for a CRT they recently purchased. They feel like they know the answer, but they're looking for confirmation. They got a hold of a 24-inch Sanyo from 2004 with component inputs on the back. Looking at the documentation online, it confirms that it does 240p and 480i through component. They currently have HD RetroVision cables, and they did run the 240p test suite from the Super Nintendo and confirmed that it does accept both input types. Since they have those cables and that component input, is this something they really need to look into doing? So honestly, no. This is one of those things where if you really wanted to nitpick, you could do an RGB mod to it and you could bypass the onboard circuitry and you might maybe get a tiny bit better quality, but that's definitely not where I would spend my time. Now, I've done that before just to test this exact theory so that I could confidently answer this question. But no, I think I would spend your time playing games and knowing that you have a really awesome CRT and you got lucky that you have component video inputs. So yeah, be confident that you have an awesome solution. And if you ever see video issues or you're questioning the quality, I would spend that time and effort recapping the CRT and doing basic calibrations to it. And, I think that would be effort better spent, because there's also a lot that can go wrong when you mod stuff like that. Whereas, if you do it yourself and you know what you're doing, or if you hire a pro to do it, recapping a consumer CRT isn't the world's hardest job. I wouldn't call it easy, but it's not hard compared to a lot of other things that people do. So, yep, Ryan, you have an awesome CRT. Confidently use it and know that you have a great solution. And I wouldn't even think about RGB modding it unless you started to get into weird specific stuff, like you only had RGB SCART cables and you wanted to add, things that probably don't apply to 99.9% of retro nerds. So I think you're good in your scenario. Next up, Rent Optional recently bought the Sprite Decade book by Rodrigo based on my recommendation and wants to know if there's any other retro gaming related coffee table books that are out there that I would recommend. Definitely Evan Amos's book, without a doubt. Evan's the one that put all of those pictures of consoles and accessories and everything else up on Wikipedia for free, and they're Wikimedia Commons, so anybody could use them. And his work is incredible. So not only do you get a book that actually looks great with some awesome pictures in it, but you do get to support a member of the community that gives us all everything for free all the time. And I use his pictures. I mean, there hasn't been a week that's gone by that I haven't, I have it bookmarked. And when I need to make thumbnails, I'll always use Evan's pictures and stuff like that. So I even have him credited as an unofficial member of RetroRGB because I use his pictures so often. So definitely that one. But people in the comments, let me know if there's anything else that you suggest that you think is awesome. There's probably a bunch of others that I've bought over the years that I'm just forgetting, but that's the first one that pops into my mind because it's retro gaming hardware at its best. And I'll leave a link to everything for whoever's interested. Another one from Rent Optional. Is there any update on the white line fix for an SNES Junior? The latest information on the site said it's not really needed if you're using Voltar's bypass board. However, there's also details on replacing the stock 7805 with a better one, and the FX Pack Pro can fix it a bit as well. They plan on recapping and installing Voltar or Bordy's board, plus doing the C11 ghosting fix and replacing the C5 cap to eliminate jail bars. Is there any reason to do the brightness fix with the board? So this is my opinion. I guess the fact is probably not, but my strong opinion on this is you're going to go and recap a console and replace a couple of other fixes to it. And so why not just replace the stock 7805, which is a component that will absolutely die at some point. Now, it might take another 20 years to die, or it might take another 20 days. Who knows? It's not a common problem. It's not like, caps in a Game Gear where everybody knows about it, but it is something that will eventually fail. So I personally would take the 7805 out of the SNES and keep it somewhere, throw it in an anti-static bag, label it original or whatever, because I'm weird. I don't know why I would keep it, but I would. And then I would put a newer replacement in there. And of course, clean off the heat sink really well. And I would apply a tiny bit of thermal paste on there just to make sure. But I would absolutely do it because it costs more to ship a bunch of stuff than it does to buy another one of those. So if you're already putting your order in for console 5, adding that to your cart is you're barely gonna notice the difference in price. And why not, right? You're spending all of this time trying to refurbish a console, so you might as well just try to get the best of everything that you can on it. But other than that, no, I really wouldn't worry too much more about it. I would do the fixes that you mentioned, and I would probably replace that. But, it's up to you. You certainly don't have to. It's not like one of these things where you say, like, if the question was, oh, I saw the sink capacitor was leaking, so I'm just going to replace that one, I would say, no, you have to replace them all. If one of them's leaking, the rest of them are probably going to shortly or already are, so just do it. Whereas this is not, it's up to you, but that's certainly what I would do. And, whatever you choose is not going to be the wrong answer, so do whatever you feel like. But yeah, I would swap out the 7805. Next up, Tim the Gamer 23 is finally looking into doing a triple bypass on a Sega Genesis. Do I know if Zaxour's version 2 Plus board is the latest or best version to go with? Yeah, whatever's the newest version of Zaxour's board is absolutely awesome. You can keep composite video with that one, I think. I'm 99% sure. And it doesn't affect it too much. To get the absolute cleanest, you're going to need to disable composite, but my opinion on that's definitely changed with how accurate the Mr. Core is. And if you want crazy, perfect analog video output, maybe getting an FPGA solution might be a little bit better. But if you want something that's reasonable, like with the Genesis Model 1, you're going to significantly notice a video upgrade when doing this. But I wouldn't obsess the way I used to. So I personally would rather keep composite just because what if, right? What if you need it one day? What if somebody who gets it after you goes to use it, plugs in a composite cable and it doesn't work? So they go, oh, it's dead. And they throw out a perfectly awesome console. I hope that stuff doesn't happen often. But yeah, it's just my suggestions on it. But that's all up to you. There's no wrong way to do it. And yes, Zaxour's boards are awesome. Next, do I have any tips for keeping a soldering iron steady as us nerds age? Well, stop drinking so much. No, I'm kidding. Honestly, no. My hands are still fairly steady, but randomly some days, just my eyes get worse on some days than others. I think allergies must really be affecting my eyes as well. So for me personally, that's the issue I have, but I've been lucky with pretty steady hands. And I think years of playing blistering guitar stuff kind of kept my hands in shape for that. I always joked that I'm like an athlete from the elbow down, which, insert whatever joke you'd like. But when it comes to guitar, that was actually the truth. Which I kind of miss playing, to be honest with you. It's been too long. But yeah, so I'm lucky that I don't have that issue. But personally, I just think it's one of those things where as everybody gets older, we all have the things that bug us, and we got to figure out workarounds. So maybe rest your arm on something. Don't rest your arm on something. I would just once again, treat it like an athlete. What would an aging athlete do if they can't throw as hard? What other weird tricks can you use? Is there anything you could do beforehand? And of course, if anybody has any suggestions other than, quit drinking so damn much, let us know in the comments. But yeah, I think that's a battle everybody's going to fight on their own. Well, that's it for this week. The questions just happen to only be on Patreon this time, and that happens now and then because that's where the majority of people support. But anybody who supports on any of these services, feel free to ask a question. Just please do so in the latest Q&A post. The way the services work, I can't really figure out what's a new question on an old post. Plus, as you saw here today, I like just scrolling through and answering these questions in real time as if we were hanging out at an expo somewhere. I like these to be laid back and as fun as super nerdy stuff could be. I think they're fun, but whatever. But anyway, as always, thank you to everybody who supports in absolutely any way, because it really is you who's keeping it all going. So thanks very much, and I'll see you next week.